All right. I think we're good to go, Dave. How are you, man? What's going on?
Good to get on here and talk with you. We haven't talked in a while.
I've been on your channel
Yeah.
a number of times, doing different interviews. You've never been on mine, so this is the first time I get the pleasure of interviewing the original media bodybuilding personality.
Thank you. Thank you.
How,
I appreciate the title too. Yeah.
Dave, you have been, I mean, look, aside from the magazines,
Yeah.
you're like the originator of internet bodybuilding media. Um, what is that like? Like, do you look back at that now? How much has your media changed since starting from the very beginning? What did the beginning look like compared to what it
But
looks like now?
I didn't know what the heck I was doing in the beginning. When Steve Blackman had hired me actually, even before Steve Blackman hired me for muscular development, I had built one of the first websites. Like no one had websites. Initially before there was social media, it was like davepalumbo.com, which I still have. But
Yeah,
I would go to these shows because I was working with a lot of athletes, and I would just take pictures like of people I thought looked good, my clients, fun stuff we would do, like going out. And I put them on my website, like in a photo gallery.
yeah,
And people wanted to see what was going on at these shows. At the time, remember, it was only magazines. So it would take 3 months before those things came out. So people actually started going to my website. And I noticed like judges were looking at my website to see what like the gossip of the weekend was, because I was
yeah.
going to a lot of shows.
Hmm.
And I guess Blackman over at Muscular Development had seen what I was doing. He said, we got to, we don't have a website. He goes, I'd like you to, be the editor in chief and start our Muscular Development website.
Yeah,
And I think at the time, Dan Solomon was the only person really doing anything in terms of podcasts. He had a bodybuilding podcast, Pro Bodybuilding Weekly, and that was the only thing out there. And that was on bodybuilding.com, which people don't even remember, but they were
yeah.
like our major competition when we first were launched. So um, we started that website. John Romano and I did a radio show called Noble Radio. Actually, it was originally Valentina was on that first, and then there was a guy Larry Pepe who was on it, and it
Hmm.
kind of eventually meshed with that John and I did it. And it was so hard to do a podcast. You had to call into like a call center. You had to like at a certain time, and you only had an hour. And
Yeah,
if you couldn't go 1 minute over, and it was like really controlled and everything like that.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
very nerve wracking at first, because and he only got one shot a week at this thing. And then 3 years later, I kind of Blackman fired us for whatever reason, and I started RX Muscle. I had the website already, and it was like a magazine. And then I started doing my own thing, and I hired a guy who understood audio, and we started recording our own podcasts and then uploading them to the podcast thing. This is all
sure.
before like YouTube and everything.
Yeah,
No one was really using YouTube. So at that point, it was just audio. There was no video. You would listen to it on an iPod or on your iPhone, the
yeah,
rudimentary iPhones they had,
yeah.
and or your computer screen. And then eventually, I said we got to go to video,
Hmm.
and I, I didn't know how to do it because there was no you there was no, it was there was no tools to do it,
Yeah, yeah,
and it was hard. And I said it's got to be able you got to be able to do it. I think because I saw the future is of bodybuilding coverage as being these TV shows that we would do with original content, like debate shows and news shows. And I couldn't have foreseen what we have now, like the extent of it. But I said it's got to
yeah.
be. So I figured out. I found a guy who can do TV stuff, and it was very difficult at first, but we did it and we uploaded it. And so I think that the history of it, when I look back, I'm like, it's a miracle that we were able to do it. People now think it's like a joke because you can get on your iPhone and you can start live
I know.
streaming anywhere in the world to any platform that you want. But it
Right.
wasn't like that. It was really, really hard,
So what?
at back then.
Who was paying? Before I want to get back to the Bleckman thing
Yeah,
real quick because I don't know what all happened there and I don't know how far you want to
right.
go into it. But
Yeah, I'll go into
before
whatever you want to ask.
before I go into that, when you were taking pictures of all the shows, is that your own expense? Were you just paying your own way to go to
Yeah,
these things? And like,
right.
were you making any money back from these things, or was it just purely out of passion?
I wasn't really making money directly. And I always tell people this: if you want to be successful in life, don't worry about, money, because it'll come. I was
Right.
doing it as a passion, but I was kind of there. with my clients. So, and I was picking up a lot of new clients because people would see me at the shows, and they'd be like, "Oh, Dave helped this guy. He looks great. I'm going to hire. Can I hire you?" So I kind of was making money
Okay.
indirectly by getting more people on board, but it actually was building a brand for myself. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I
Right.
always told people, before when the internet first came out in the 90s, there used to be some websites, and I was writing for a couple of websites, Mesomorphosis. I don't know if you remember that website. It
Yeah.
was like
Yeah, I do.
I used to do a Q&A on there, and they paid me a little bit, but I answered everyone's. I've always answered people's questions for free because I
Hmm.
felt like, what, if you give knowledge back to people, and this is the Bill Phillips method too, and I kind of emulated what he was doing. If you give knowledge out to people, it'll come back to you, and they'll hire you, or they'll recommend you, or they'll. So, I got a lot of like seminars and appearances and stuff like that from that, and guest posing. I used to go do guest posing. I would do a seminar at the guest posing. I wouldn't even charge these people.
I
And I'm like,
remember
it's just,
I went to one of yours.
oh, that's right. You did in
Yeah,
Windsor, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah. That's where I met you.
That's but so what is okay, there's a whole bunch to like get from that. So
Yeah.
you're building a brand, but you're doing it out of passion. I remember when I started, so this is back when you're talking about these days, you're talking about early 2000s, correct?
Right. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
2001,
Yeah.
2002, 2003. This is before, yeah, before I got hired yeah, I was just going to the shows, and I was still competing at the time too. So,
So I think your start in media was around my start in bodybuilding period.
pretty much.
Because I started bodybuilding like year 2000, and
Right.
I remember seeing like the No Bull Radio.
Right.
I remember all those things you kind of discussed. I remember you guys
That was '06. Yeah.
with MD and all that. So I kind of was there for like your rise through it.
Right.
I don't remember the Dave Palumbo site. I think that might have been I was still doing message boards and all that before I got too deep into it. But but you were more of a prominent coach. Not that you're not a prominent coach now. I
Yes.
know obviously you still have all the knowledge, but
Yeah. Yeah.
you were talked about as somebody that a lot of guys would go to for prep.
Right.
Now, I don't know if you moved away from that for whatever reason, or you're just too busy with business, but
Right.
why did you go away from coaching? Because you did have a lot of success with it.
Right. Yeah, I probably have more clients now than I did back then,
Oh, really?
ironically enough, because you know
Yeah.
what? There's more people competing today than there was back then.
Right,
I
right,
just had like bigger names, I think, because I think, you know what happened, Fuad? There was no one out there who had any information. So
right.
I was the only one out there talking about anabolics and diet and fat, protein, carbs, and supplements. And
Right.
so I was the only. There was no Instagram gurus, or
Yeah.
TikTok gurus out
Yeah.
there. So I was the only game in town. So people didn't know what to do. They didn't
Right.
know how to diet properly. Chad was around and those guys, but for the guys who were coming up, they weren't going to go to Chad. They didn't want to spend $5,000. They didn't have the money to spend. So
Mhm.
I had a lot of guys that were like at the top, national level, and then or they were just aspiring to be there, and they just didn't have the knowledge base. So I was, providing these people with knowledge. It's funny because I'm probably still providing these top guys with knowledge. They're just getting my knowledge, and then they have their coach that are local to them, or they have,
Yeah.
an Instagram guy that's very popular, and they look, everyone. I always tell people there's so many people out there to train and to diet. There's enough for everyone to go around, and
Right.
some people resonate better with other people. A lot of these pros, and yourself, some people just need a lot of coddling and a lot of interaction.
Right.
They like to be able to text you 40 times a day, and there are coaches like that who can do that. I don't have the time to do that. And it's not that I'm
Yeah.
against it, because I do have some clients that text me 40 times a day, but they're far and few between. Those are just
Right.
people that and they don't do it all the time. They do it like close to a show, and I'm fine with that. So I have a lot of clients, like I said, more than I did then. I'm not out there like seeking people and trying to get people to sign up with me, because I don't care one way or another.
Yeah.
Most of the people who come up to me, and I have a lot of pros come up to me at shows and say, you know what? I know you don't coach me, but you do coach me, because I watch everything you do and say,
Right.
and
Right.
I
Right.
learn a lot from what you're doing. I was talking to
Right.
Antoine Valiant and Frank McGrath this past weekend. They're down here at Muscle Asylum in
Yeah.
Port Charlotte, and they were saying the same thing. They're like, I watch everything you do, that I learn all my stuff from you. So even though maybe I'm not coaching directly, I'm still I'm still educating people, I think.
Yeah. So for coaching back in the day, I
Yeah.
remember your system was, I don't want to say keto because I don't think it's traditional keto, but you were
No.
the first. I don't want to say the first. Everybody thinks they're the first
Yeah.
everything. People think I'm the
Right.
first podcast. Seth Ferosi thinks he's the first guy to talk about steroids. Everybody thinks they're the first everything. It's funny, actually. I think you were the first. You might actually be the first personality publicly to get out and talk about steroids, like amongst the masses. Because
Yeah.
even though there was coaches like Chad and Chris and
Right.
Hani back in the day, nobody gave out any of that kind of, even they still don't give out that information, but nobody really
Right.
talked about that stuff. So
I'll give Bill Phillips I think Bill Phillips deserves the credit on that one because Bill wrote that book, The Anabolic Reference Guide. I'm not talking about Bill Llewellyn,
well,
who's now
no, but
writing.
there was books for sure. I'm not saying there wasn't anything, but I'm
Right.
talking about like a large bodybuilding personality. I
I
don't,
got you. Okay. Yeah,
you know what I
I'll go
mean?
along with that. Yes.
I don't know if there was anybody, but um, I guess what I was getting at originally was you were kind of the first that I noticed that was really stuck on the no carb thing. You're like, we don't need
Right.
carbs. Carbs are
Right.
not essential. And do you still live by that, or have you changed in any way moving like throughout the
Uh,
years?
yeah. It's a good question, and I'll tell you why. Because you know how like when Dorian and Menser discovered heavy duty training, and
Right.
they realized that if you train with less volume but higher intensity, full range of motion, heavy weights, you grow better.
Hmm.
I, I completely gravitated to that. My body responded great to that because I'm an I can overtrain real easily.
Right.
And what they did was they took it sometimes like to too much of a degree. Like you only need 2 sets, in the whole workout,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's just not practical, for
Right.
most people because they can't, they just don't have, I mean, yeah, if you have Dorian Yates and you already have your whole physique built already, maybe you can maintain what you have with that. But so
Right.
I think what happened was I discovered that, fats and how important fats were, and that there wasn't just one type of fats, but there was like saturated fats versus polyunsaturated fats, which were your essential fatty acids, omega 3s and 6s, and then you
Yep.
had your monounsaturated fats like your olive oil, macadamia oil, avocado oil. And I realized that they were all so important to building muscle because all the cell membranes are made up of fats, and we weren't eating enough fat in our diet because that whole 80s, early 90s mentality
Yeah.
was just no fat, high protein, and carbs, and that's it. And it was really based on what they were recommending. The American Heart Association was recommending don't eat fat because you're going to get worse heart disease. Eat carbs, and people ate carbs and they got more heart disease. But that's
Yeah.
another story.
Yeah.
So I realized I wasn't growing, and no matter how many grams of carbs and protein, I couldn't grow past a certain point. And when I started putting fats in, I came to this revelation. So I realized after doing a lot more research, because remember I had a med school background, is that carbs were not really essential nutrients; they were just fuel sources.
Right.
Now, fuel is important, but you don't need a lot of fuel. And so I said, I wonder if when I diet, if I can keep my carbs real low, because everyone keeps carbs low anyway. If I can lower my carbs even lower, than low, and eat more fat, in my diet, how will I look? In my body, I looked great. I felt good. My brain was working. I wasn't hungry. And I realized I discovered by accident the ketosis effect. And then I started studying that. I said, hey, wait, Atkins does a ketogenic diet, but he doesn't recommend, he doesn't really, customize how much protein and fat you should eat. He kind of just says, do whatever you want, just don't eat carbs. So I
Right.
realized bodybuilders need high protein and we don't need quite as much fat. So I kind of made like a bodybuilding version of the ketogenic diet, and it
Right.
worked great. And for
Right.
people, especially women, it works amazing because women are terrible carb metabolism.
Yeah.
And guys were responding really well to it too. And I was using it on everyone because I said, it works on everyone. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Of course,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
always a few people it doesn't work on, but,
Right.
and then as you evolve, and as I evolved, I realized, what, not everyone needs to do a ketogenic diet, but the whole premise of high protein, moderate fat works. We know that you need that for building repair muscle, but some people can handle the carbs too. So I started doing like a cyclical. Nowadays it's evolved, to cut to the chase, to a
Yeah.
more cyclical. So some days I'll have people do, protein and vegetables and some carbs. And on other days, I'll have them do protein and fat, because the good thing about fat is you can store it. So you don't really need to eat the fat every single day. The essential fats in a supplement form you do, but you don't need to eat the massive amounts or the higher amounts. So I kind of cycle the days. And then some people who are just fatzos and who don't do well on carbs, I do pure ketogenic diets with them. Probably all the women I work with, I do ketogenic diets with. Very few get carbs, because they just don't do well in it. So now I'm a little more flexible. I wouldn't say I use a ketogenic diet on everyone, but there's some component of the science is still there. It's just not full application anymore of everyone's not getting the same diet, in other words.
Can I get into, actually, I just want to read this Auburn's comment real quick because he donated $5. Hi, Fouad and Palumbo. Thanks for making our adult work life go by fast. I'm a high school bio teacher, and I'm always looking forward to y'all's podcasts. Thank you, Auburn. I want to get into the details a little bit just for a minute on the weeds of your diet structure, because I'm interested myself.
Sure.
So you're doing days where it's just protein and fat, and then other days where it's just protein and carb, and then maybe some days that are a mix.
No, usually
or
it's
is,
like,
or is there no mix? It's one or the other.
Yeah, I don't really mix it usually, unless toward the end when I'm carbing people up, or when they're, you get a guy or a girl with a crazy metabolism. I can give them protein, fat, and carbs, and they actually look good. When I carb people up, I think a big mistake people make is that they take the fat out, or they don't have fat in there. Because when you have fat in the process and you're carbing people up, number one, you don't have to give them as many carbs.
Right.
Number two, they don't go flat, because a lot of times if you give no fat and you eat just protein and carbs, a lot of times you can give them 2,000 grams. You hear these guys that he ate 3,000 grams of carbs for the day and he's still flat. Well, because you need fat too,
Guys will wake up flatter the next day sometimes from doing that.
And then they eat a pizza pie, or they eat, and the next day they look amazing because of all the fat in the pizza.
Okay, question though. Let's go back. Let's eliminate the peak week. Let's just say you're talking about somebody in weeks 8 to 4.
Gotcha. Okay. So so I would do like a day where they would eat like, chicken breast, green beans, and some white rice for a meal. Never a ton of carbs, unless the person's a genetic, wacky freak, maybe like, some oatmeal and egg whites in the morning. Maybe some,
it doesn't have to be that specific. So we go one day protein carb, and then one day protein fat.
Protein, and the protein fat days, they're eating higher fats, like anywhere, some guys can eat 25, 30 grams of fat per meal with, like 50, 60 grams of protein. And then they're eating no direct sources of carbs, right?
Okay. So my question then isn't the basis of the ketogenic diet or a no carb diet to get into ketosis?
Yes.
And how do you get them into ketosis if you're flipping back and forth? That's my
they're not in ketosis, because some guys don't need to be in ketosis. Now, if I got a person who said to me, I want to be in ketosis because I don't do well on carbs because it makes me too hungry, then I could put them on protein fat every day, and I'll give them a cheat meal once a week where they're eating carbs, so that just to carb them up and keep their metabolism going. But for a lot of people, they don't need to be in ketosis. The ketosis is really good for women because, number one, women don't like to feel bloated. So they love that ketogenic diet because you don't hold any water on it. You don't have cravings because your brain is using fats as a fuel source exclusively. You're in ketosis, as you pointed out. And they just do better on that. For guys, if I get like a guy who needs to lose, 70 pounds, and he comes to me and says, Dave, I want to just I want to look good for my vacation, or I want to compete. And I'm like, you got 70 pounds to lose. We're going to have to, can I do what I need to do? Do whatever you need to do. And I'll put them on a ketogenic diet. And they do great on that. They make great progress. And there's just some people that don't metabolize carbs well. And I think that's something that I learned over the last 10 years is not everyone's metabolism is the same. There are people out there who are good carb burners, and there are people who are bad carb burners. And if they're bad carb burners, you do not want to, give them too many grams of carbs during the diet because they're just not going to metabolize. And you can tell the bad carb burners too. You test their fasting blood sugars. They run high fasting blood sugars in the morning. They just don't handle carbohydrates well. But then there's people that have these crazy metabolisms. You see in bodybuilding, you can feed these guys anything, and they're going to get in shape. And those guys, there's no reason to deprive them of anything. I'll give them protein, fat, and carbs. So I'm more flexible now, and I'm better at assessing people's metabolisms when I start working with them by seeing how they handle different foods.
Right.
properly. And that's
Right.
why it's better to start with too much food than too little food.
Okay. Last question on this topic. I want to ask you, so if let's say you got somebody on a keto diet strictly,
Mhm.
and I know you said you do a cheat meal once a week, but
Right.
and the reason I'm asking this is I did carnivore for like 6 weeks. I had great results fat loss wise,
Right.
but not great results performance wise.
Gotcha.
So that's the kind of the question I wanted to ask is
Mhm.
how do you keep somebody's strength up? How do you keep somebody's pumps up? And how do you keep
Yeah.
them looking round? Or is the looking round not a worry while you're getting the fat off, but still then you're worried about
Yeah.
strength and performance? How do you
Yeah.
keep that at its like a
Mm.
higher level?
What I don't like about the carnivore diet, because let's face it, the carnivore diet is a ketogenic diet,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's a restrictive ketogenic diet.
Sure.
And I don't understand what the mindset of that diet is. That why would you restrict the body from having good essential fatty acids, and from eating, more sources of food that give a better varied diet without eating carbs? Like, why can't you have macadamia nut oil, and why can't
Can,
you have avocados,
can I
and
answer that?
what? Yeah,
Can I answer that?
yeah. I'd like to. Yeah.
Their reasoning is
Mm.
the restriction is more for any ailments, diseases, conditions they may have, because they're doing such a restriction that they're able to cure some of these skin diseases or different things that they have going on.
Right, but you know, these oils actually are good for skin. They're for all these
Yeah,
things that people are doing the carnivore diet for. These things that they're restricting are actually helpful and healing.
I see.
So it doesn't
Okay.
make sense to me. And I find that when you restrict the fat sources, you also restrict how the body responds, because the body needs polyunsaturated fats. It needs monounsaturated fats. It doesn't just need saturated fat. And I
Right.
think the restriction aspect of it is what limits the performance benefits of it, I think.
I see.
So, it just doesn't make sense, because I know why people do it. And I've seen people get good results, but I think they're getting good results because they're on a ketogenic diet, not because they're on the carnivore diet. And I think if they did my ketogenic, version of the diet, which is non-restrictive in the sense that you don't always have to have meats and stuff like that, I think they would get even better results, is what I'm saying.
I see. So you
Yeah,
think having the additional sources of fat, different types of fat,
absolutely.
will keep all of your performance levels, like your strength and all
Yeah.
of that, will stay at
Yeah.
its peak.
I'll tell you why I believe that to be true. Because when I first started experimenting with the ketogenic diet, I was doing the McDonald's ketogenic diet, which is
I was going to
pretty
ask you
much the
about that.
carnivore. It's the carnivore. It's carnivore. McDonald's is carnivore. I wouldn't
Yeah.
eat the bun, but I'd eat all the
Yeah.
burgers and stuff like that,
Right.
and cheeses and stuff like that. And I didn't look as good. And then when I started incorporating fish oils and olive oil or macadamia
Yeah.
oil, avocados into my, and I looked completely different. And so
That's interesting.
there's something to not having your body be deprived of anything. Another important thing is if you deprive your body of something it needs, essential fats, your body tends to hoard fat in certain weird areas. Like in women,
I
it's
got you.
their like butt and glutes. Men,
Yeah.
it's like their lower back, and you just can't get that fat off because their body's like, you're not giving us what we need. We're not letting this stuff
Right.
go.
Right. So everybody who watches my podcast knows I'm like a food junkie. So I wanted to ask
Yeah,
you about your McDonald's diet because
yeah,
look, I've been an advocate of bulking for a long time, and
right,
and I don't know if you were, I know this is something that most guys did in the,
yeah,
80s, 90s, early 2000s.
right.
It seems like as times progressed, maybe past 2010, bulking is slowly starting to be not a good thing, where I
Mhm.
don't know if I totally agree. I still think guys put on the most mass when they're taking in a ton of calories.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you a couple questions about that, but I
Sure.
want to start with the McDonald's thing
Mhm.
because it seems to be one of your trademarks. So explain to me how McDonald's was incorporated into your diet, why, how often,
Yeah.
and was it just because you were hungry, or was it like you actually thought it was helping you?
It all started with early '90s mentality of just like tuna and rice and chicken and rice diet, and
Yeah.
I couldn't grow. I would eat, like, it didn't matter how much I ate it. I said I couldn't grow. And one day I went to I've told this story before. I've gone to McDonald's one day and with a bunch of friends, and I ate like like 10 cheeseburgers or something like that. And literally I looked like the Hulk morphing in front of these people because,
Yeah.
and the next day I was heavier and I looked leaner. And then we did it again the next day. And it was like this controlled experiment where I was like growing it like by leaps. And it was like, my body wanted to grow, but I wasn't giving it what it needed to grow, which was
Right.
fat.
Right.
And
Right.
all of a
Right.
sudden, and obviously McDonald's is not the best fat, but it was fat nonetheless, and it worked. And that's when I said, wait a second, there's nothing in McDonald's that's different from what I'm eating except the fat. It has to be the fat. And that's when I started doing a deep dive into fats. So
Yeah.
when and I've talked to Hunter Labrada about this too, because Hunter has a really fast metabolism, and the volume of food that he needs to eat would blow his stomach out to here. He said, and
Yeah.
so we were talking about denser foods, like taking in foods that are actually super dense in calories, but don't take up a lot of volume. And I
Right.
think at some point I discovered that if I did McDonald's, I would eat McDonald's once a day. I would eat like 2 triple cheeseburgers, like a fries and some apple
Is
pies.
is this without the bun, or are you just eating everything at this point?
At this point, when I was off season, yeah, I would eat the bun
Yeah.
and everything like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I would
Yeah.
do this one meal a day, and the rest of the meals would be my clean, typical bodybuilding meals.
Right.
And I would, if I didn't do that meal every day, I looked different. And it was like, and I don't know if it was the amount of calories, the density of calories, or the fact that the food actually slowed my metabolism down, but I
Yeah.
grew on that diet. It just
Right.
worked for me because I think by nature, bodybuilders, we eat very clean. And it's
Right.
like it was my body needed a dirty meal to somehow slow down this crazy runaway metabolism. Now, other people have the opposite problem.
Yeah.
They look at McDonald's and they get fat. So
Yeah.
it's not for everyone,
Right. Right.
But
Right.
I do work with a lot of bodybuilders that have such fast metabolisms because they can't gain weight in the off season that they need. I apply that approach. It doesn't have to be McDonald's. It can be Wendy's. It can be anything that's like dense. Otherwise, you're giving them. I just don't think it's healthy to eat 1,000 grams of carbs a day. You know what I mean? Every
Right.
single
Right.
day. I think it's
Right.
your pancreas gets overwhelmed and it's unnecessary. So you have to come up with other ideas and other concepts of how you can get enough calories and enough nutrients in so that you can grow without this enormous volume of food.
Right. No, I like what you're saying because I get emails from people all the time that are, hard gainers, or they think they're hard gainers and they're like, I can't gain any weight. And I'm like, what are you eating? And they tell me what they're eating. And sometimes they're eating a lot and sometimes they're not eating a lot. But the one constant I've noticed is they're all eating chicken and rice.
Nice.
And I'm like,
it doesn't work. It
I'm
doesn't
like,
work.
look, I'm like, look, man, that works for, like you said, it works for some guys,
Yeah, yeah,
but other guys just can't. If you're a hard gainer, or if you work construction, or if you,
yeah.
it's just not enough to feed you. So I like that
Right.
you're saying that, because I think more people need to hear that there are other options other than just chicken and rice.
Right, right. I mean, because when I was competing also initially, before I realized about fats too, I would do remember Metrics was the big thing. I worked for Metrics
Right.
back then. So we would take these Metrics packets and I would literally mix them with 100 grams of Ultra Fuel, which is 100 grams of carbs. I would do those 6 times a day. That's 600 grams of carbs from Ultra Fuel with whatever the Metrics was, like 40 grams of protein. And there was like there was some carbs in there too.
Mhm.
And I still wasn't growing. So I'm like, something's just not right here. Yeah. How much more can I consume?
Yeah. My assessment about it would be, it's not just the fat and the sodium, but like you said, I think it's just slowing you down.
Yeah.
Because it seems like, because when you're just doing protein and carbs, it's like your body just burning through it. It's running faster and
100%.
faster to keep up. The one question I want to ask though is, I know you have spoken about being genetically like a leaner guy, never carrying a lot of fat, always like really hard, even in the off season. I know that's partly genetic, but is it partly due to drugs? Like, I don't know how deep you want to get into it, but at the time you're eating McDonald's, are you just doing a ton of shit? Are you doing IGF? Are you doing GH? Or is there stuff that's really keeping you from putting weight on?
I'm going to tell you something, and you can believe it or not. Okay. But number one, I have a theory about I have a good metabolism probably anyway, but I was a runner for 5 years. And when you run long distance, I'm talking about, I was running 10 miles a day. Right. When you run like that, you're activating muscle in your legs, but you're not activating the fast twitch fibers that get big, the hypertrophy fibers. You're activating the slow twitch endurance fibers. And what they do is they make themselves more oxygen efficient. They learn how to metabolize fat better. So you produce more nuclei, you produce more mitochondria. And you don't see this happening because the cells are not getting bigger, but they're doing this because you're forcing them into oxygen debt for, every day for 10 miles. I mean, your body has to adapt and learn to create ATP quickly.
Right.
And I think once you do that, and I've talked to a lot of guys that were long distance runners. Roman Fritz was one. I forget, a couple of guys recently. I don't know if it was a Martin Fitzwater. A couple of guys told me they were long distance runners, and they have the same situation I did. And when they switched to bodybuilding, all those metabolic changes that evolved in their muscle cells, they're still there. So we're just better fat burners. We're better at oxidizing fat, at accessing ATP, and it doesn't go away. And so I think I kind of permanently, altered my metabolic rate. Another thing too is what people don't realize is when you do a lot of endurance activity like that, you produce new nuclei for the muscle cells, but the cells don't get bigger. But now if you go and do hypertrophy type exercises, you have more potential muscle cells there. I think that's why guys that were long distance runners get big, huge legs. Right. They just have more potential to grow. So I think I kind of permanently altered my metabolic rate a little bit.
I can see that
from doing that,
So your competitive career, what was the first time what year was it? The first time you competed?
I want to get back to the drug thing because so anyway, so what I noticed, and I confirmed it recently, when I was off all anabolics and HRT for 7 years when I had my 3 kids.
Okay.
And at some point I said, you know what? I had lost a lot of weight. I looked like I was from Ethiopia because I had 2 shoulder surgery repairs. I had an ankle fusion. I had my thyroid removed. I had an aorta repair. Like it all went back to back to back to back to back. Now, now I'm about 2 years post all those operations. But so I lost so much weight. I said, I'm going back on HRT because you know what? Even though my testosterone was still like 450, 500, I said, there's no reason for me to suffer anymore. I'm not having any more kids. So I went back on, and I'm on 100 milligrams a week. And I respond to that 100 milligrams a week. Like you would think I was taking, people think I'm on like 1,000 milligrams of testosterone. And I realized that naturally, I'm not like a naturally big freaky guy but when I take a little bit of drugs, I'm like a super hyper responder. And I didn't realize this until I did this experiment. So back in the 90s and early 2000s, no one did the drugs that guys do. No one would even think to do more than 1,000 milligrams of testosterone a week. That was like considered like radical, And we would do 1,000 testosterone. We would do like 400 DECA or 300 EQ or, or if we did trenbolone, it was like Parabol. It was like 2 amps a week of 76 milligrams. No one did that much drugs. Now the drugs were real, okay? And I've said this before. I do like 2 to 4 IUs of GH. I mean, usually it was 3 because it was expensive. So, and my body responded like crazy to that. So I can't say I was on a ton of drugs. I did some IGF intermittently when I had access to it. And I was doing insulin because I couldn't grow it without it. I was doing like some Humulin R, like I've talked about this, like 10 IUs in the morning, and I would do 8 IUs like a couple hours later. But I didn't do that the whole career, early in my career. And because I didn't know anything about insulin and blood sugar control like I do now. But it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. You would never say, well, that was an insane cycle like Andreas Munzer did or something like that. So I don't think it was the drug. I think I'm a hyper responder to the drugs, but I don't think the drugs are what made my metabolism that good, is I guess the point I was making.
I wonder if that can qualify you as a hyper responder, only because the only reason I say that is, so I took like a normal dose, like my average dose for test for me was like 1250. That's where I found like I was getting the most benefit, which is high, but that's where I got the most benefit.
Right.
Now, after retiring, I've gone off everything for like, there was a period where I was sporadically doing shots here and there. And then I went off completely for like 6 to 8 months or something like that. And now I'm doing like 125 milligrams a week.
How do you feel?
I'm noticing the same thing you noticed. I'm like,
growing here.
I'm like, why the fuck did I do 1250? I'm doing 100, but I don't think I don't know if it's the same. Like, I don't know if it counts the same. Like, I don't know if you would, like, is it muscle memory? Is it like,
oh yeah, you have muscle memory. Yeah. You're not going to grow on 125 milligrams a week beyond what you were. Yeah. But I think that you're a better responder than you think. Look, let's face it. I didn't have the best structure. That's why I didn't go to the next level in bodybuilding, but I was 315 pounds.
You're a big fucking guy. Yeah.
I went from a 140-pound run to 300. I mean, that's insane if you think about it. So I must have been a hyper responder to
Right.
drugs
Right.
because I got that big and I
Yeah.
wasn't fat, So it might not have looked as good as when Ronnie Coleman was that big because he had a better
Right.
structure than me, but I
Right.
still put the muscle on. So I must be a hyper responder to
Right.
drugs
Right.
because I'm
Right.
not that when I'm not on drugs, I'm not that strong in the gym and I don't look big. So,
Right.
but
Right.
when I take something, it's like my body, it's like just responds very quickly to it.
Right.
Like I said, if I had Livroni's genetics, people would say, "Oh, he's like Livroni. He's a hyper responder," but I don't have his genetics, so they're
I
not saying that. But you're the same way. You grew very quickly too
yeah.
over the course of your career, and I think that probably had you used less drugs, you would have gotten the same results. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Who I asked Stefan, the coach Stefan, I can't remember his last name now, boss of Outlaw.
Yeah,
Kinsel, Stefan Kinsel.
Kinsel.
I think that I asked him about hyper responders because there was a period of time where I didn't believe hyper responder was a real thing. I thought it was just like a term guys throw out there to like because they were jealous that the guys that were getting big.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I thought they're just full of shit, right? And I realized after doing some research and having
Yeah,
different people on the podcast
right.
that being a hyper responder is a real thing. But
Yeah.
Stefan likes to call it somebody who's hyper clearer, like they can clear the drugs from their system, and that's what the benefit is because it keeps them. They use the drug and they get it out of the system, so they don't get the negative effects of it. I think that's the way he was trying to explain it.
Well, I wouldn't call them a hyper responder. What I would say there are people that don't get negatively affected toxicity wise by the drugs
Right.
because I know
Right.
guys that used to take 5 Anadrols a day. If I couldn't,
Right.
I couldn't take a half an Anadrol and get through a month on it.
I know.
I felt like I was going to die.
I know. I'm the same way. It's like,
I don't clear toxicity the way but there are other guys they'll be on 5 Anadrol a day for 6 months straight and they're fine and their liver enzymes aren't even high.
yeah, I would take one a day and I couldn't eat. I would take
Me neither.
one.
Nothing.
I would take one. I would literally eat one meal a day, and I'm like, I can't be on this drug every time I
I
fucking
was the
take it.
same way.
I'm like, there's no point if I
Yeah.
can't eat. And it's
Yeah.
funny too because I get messages from people saying I'm taking Anadrol or I'm taking Tren or I'm taking this, and I
Yeah.
can't eat.
Yeah.
So what do I do? And I'm like, well, it's fucking obvious you can't take that
Yeah.
drug because you got to eat.
Right.
So,
I don't know anyone who could really eat on Anadrol like off season. You can do it pre-contest because you're starving, but
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
And you know what? People tell me, "Oh, I can eat," and then I go over their diet with them. I'm like, "You're really not eating that much food." I said, "It does not. The Anadrol's muscle building effects will not work if you're not consuming enough food. So you might as well just stop it at this point."
Right. So I want to go back to bodybuilding competition.
Yeah.
Briefly, I just want to kind of zip through your career. So
Okay.
what year did you start competing?
90 was my first year. I was been training only 8 months. I was 168 pounds, middleweight, at a
So
natural show.
were you if you were 90, then were you a huge Lee Haney fan or a huge Dorian fan?
It's funny because I was bodybuilding, but I wasn't really. I was still like that mindset that I loved Lou Ferrigno at that point. I would say Dorian was the first guy I really looked up to because you know what, I I did 90 natural because I knew these other guys. I knew the pros were on steroids. I was delusionally thinking that I was going to grow naturally, and then I said to myself, all right, if I'm going to start using some gear at some point, it was probably like 92 or 3 or something like that. I said, who am I going to look up to? And I just thought that Dorian was the coolest, physique.
Yeah.
And I loved the fact that he had a training system that made sense logically to me. And I think I just gravitated towards him as the guy to follow, so to speak.
Okay. So you competed. I know people like to pick at you for this, but
Yeah.
for not getting your pro card, but you also did compete in probably the toughest era amateur wise. I remember I remember seeing national stages between 90 and 2005.
Mm-hmm.
Those years, that 15-year span, maybe even 2010, I don't know, but it's definitely not the same now as it was. Like, I don't know if people know now that just started following bodybuilding now, but if you go to a national level show, you may see one, maybe two standouts at a show.
Right.
If you just Google like 95 NPC USA or 1992 NPC USA, you're gonna see Paul DeMeo, fucking Flex Wheeler, fucking Kevin Levrone. These guys are all beautiful structures, all shredded.
Yeah.
So that was the era you and the guys you had to compete with. And,
Yeah.
I know this because, John Meadows was shortly after you, and
Yeah.
he competed against some of these guys too. So how do you feel about not getting a pro card? Did it take you a long time to like accept it, or just how does that all feel to you? Like,
Yeah.
was it like a dream of yours to be a pro? Was it just something you wanted for business? Like,
Right.
explain to me that whole thought process.
My whole thought process when I got into bodybuilding was I want to make a living from doing this because I love this sport. And if I can make a living doing this, then I'll never work a day in my life. I said, because this is unbelievable. If it can be done, if it can be done.
Right.
So I didn't know how
Right.
that was going to materialize. I thought it meant I had to get a pro card,
Mhm.
compete as a pro, get contracts and everything like that. But what I realized at some point was that despite I wasn't getting the pro card, I had contracts and I was doing guest posting and I was making money. And
Mhm.
so it was at some point I realized that I was actually more successful because I wasn't turning pro because the magazines would say Palumbo gets screwed again or whatever, will
Yeah.
Dave get it this time? So I was getting a lot of magazine, play, which was helping me popularity wise. It was getting me a lot of guest appearances. And I was realizing, I'm making pretty good money for someone. Metrics was paying me, I think, 50 grand at the time a year, which was a lot,
Which
in
is
the
good money
90s.
back then. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so I wasn't having to really work a real job. I was doing guest posting. So I was like, and then I realized, you know what? I kind of got what I really wanted, which is to make a living from the sport.
Right.
Maybe I don't need a pro card. Now, granted, I wanted the pro card, don't get me wrong. But really what happened to me, and I always say this, I think the fact that I didn't get a pro card probably saved my life because
Mhm.
probably I would have gone too long, taken too many drugs for too many years, and I would have not stopped. But so it probably made me stop. Also, my shoulder is the last 4 years that I competed, which were my best years, placement wise,
Right.
I was in agony. I couldn't train properly. I couldn't externally rotate my arms to hit a double bicep pose. And that's why sometimes you see these weird pictures of me like all distorted looking on stage because I couldn't externally rotate to bring my arms back into a double bicep. That's how much pain I was in. So I
Right.
really shouldn't have even been competing probably the last couple of years, but my placings were going up because my physique was getting more refined looking and it was getting more what we call muscle maturity. So I said, I'm going to keep going until I can't do this anymore.
Right.
So at some point about '04, '03 was my best. I probably should have beat Chris Cook at the USA that year. And '04, my shoulders were terrible. And I was like, you know what? This is ridiculous. I always said to myself, if I couldn't be better than the year before, then I'll stop. And so I
Right.
stopped.
Right.
And it didn't matter because I was making really good money at that time. So I'm like, you know what? You're an idiot if you think you need a pro card to make a living in this sport. You're doing very well. I had my own website. I was selling pictures and videos, and I had other people's products that I believed in. I was selling on my site. So I had several sources of income coming in, and I
Right.
said, you know what? Don't be an idiot. You're going to die if you keep doing this. And so something inside of me, I had that voice inside of me said, enough. You did it.
Right.
You have nothing to prove anymore.
How old were you? How old were you in those last 4 years? Like, when did you retire?
Early 30s. So 32,
Early
33,
30s.
34, 35. So I think I stopped at 35.
Okay, so just to put a button on it,
Yeah.
when it comes to the pro card
Right.
and you think of it now,
Mhm.
it's funny. You're the only other person I've heard say you got into bodybuilding for the same reason as I did. Most people, when you talk to them about getting into bodybuilding, you say, I want to be Mr. Olympia.
Right.
I want to win Arnold. Did you have the wherewithal early on to know that structurally or physique wise, you weren't going to be that person? Or
No,
did you just not even think of it?
no, I was delusional like the rest of us.
Oh,
I
you
said,
thought,
well, as long as I keep getting bigger, I can win, right? Because I
right,
was the biggest guy.
right,
First of all, when you're backstage at these shows, especially the shows that are very competitive, like the USA Nationals, and you're the biggest guy back there, and you're the hardest guy back there, there's a level of confidence that you get about yourself that you
right,
think, who can beat me? Because no, it's much more intimidating when you're the smallest guy, but you have the best shape because
right,
it's a size. There's a size aspect of it back there. So
right,
I felt very confident when I would go to these shows and comfortable that I was not out of my league. I just at some point when I would look at the pictures after and I would want to throw up when I looked at my structure compared to some of these other guys, even though they weren't harder than me, I realized, you know what? I'm not playing with the same genetic cards that they are,
Right.
So
I guess what I mean is like, look, we all want to win, and I'm not saying
right.
I didn't compete because
Yeah.
I didn't want to win or I didn't think I could do
Right.
well. But there was a point where I think it was after my first show or something like that, or after my second show, I think I won my first two overalls, where
Yeah.
I said I left school and I was like, I want to do this for a living.
Right.
And my mom was like, "You're fucking insane because why are you
My
leaving
father told
school?"
me the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, "No, but this is what I want to do. I want to work out." See, my goal was to turn pro, build a big
Hmm.
enough name that
Right.
somebody would invest in me and I could open a gym. That was like
Gotcha.
at 22, that was my master plan. That was like, because I was
It's
like,
a good,
how
it's a
can
good
I,
plan.
yeah, because I was like, how can I do this for a living? So that was the only way I could like think of it.
Right.
I didn't know there was such a thing as contracts for
Mm.
sponsorships and all this
Right.
stuff. So even though I wanted to be good, I
Right.
thought, I want to do this for a living. I don't want to go to a 9 to 5. I want to
Hmm.
make money doing this thing that I love. So that's kind of
Yeah.
where I guess we're the same.
Yeah,
So
we're the same. Yeah. Right.
I guess what finally though, I just wanted to ask pro card wise,
Mhm.
because of the way things have turned out for you, it's not like it doesn't stick in your mind at all. You're like, whatever.
It might be worse if the system was still the same as it was, but I went to the Masters, the North American, and they gave out probably 500 pro cards in the North American.
I
And I
know.
realized that the word pro card has been devalued to a point where I don't
Yeah.
think anyone even cares anymore. So at one point there was like a distinction of winning a pro card. It was like you were a member of a club that not everyone could be a part of, and that
Right.
it set you apart from everyone else in the bodybuilding world. It's not like that anymore.
Right.
So the guy who has a bigger following on Instagram has more clout in the bodybuilding world than the guy who won his pro card at the USA Championships, which is kind of disgusting in a sense. But
Yeah.
I almost wish they would make another category of pro card, like where an elite pro card or something like that would set you apart from like the other pros. So but I don't know. At this point, I guess it doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
the
I
guys that are the best guys always rise to the top, but so pro card doesn't mean as much today as it did when we were doing
yeah.
it.
I mean, you could think of it like boxing. In boxing, all you have to do is declare yourself a pro.
Right.
From what I know of it,
No, it's
you just
true. It's true.
you just have to say I'm a pro now,
Right.
and then
Right.
you're a pro.
Right.
So I think
Exactly.
you know what I mean. I think the last thing you said is probably the most accurate, which is the cream rises to the top.
Yeah.
So I think the distinction now between average pro and good pro is, did you qualify for the Olympia?
Right.
Did you get an invite to the Arnold? I think that's kind of
Right.
where the distinction is between
I agree. I
good
agree.
and average. Um, okay, Olympia's coming up. Actually, before we get into Olympia, I want to ask you this because you've always been an innovator. Is the business thing like you said, you started competing because you wanted to make a living doing this.
Right.
And I've always told people, if you want to make money in bodybuilding, it's not like another job where you just go collect a check. You have to have your hand in many different areas to kind
Yep.
of make a really good living. You kind of learned that early on. Did you have a mentor, somebody like right now people can look up to Jay. They can look at the Jay and go, okay, Jay competed.
Right.
He bought some houses, he did this, he did that, blah, blah. Now he's like doing a YouTube thing. Or they can look up to you or like many others that have like
Mm.
spread themselves out to make money. So did you have somebody you looked up to in that regard? Or did you just figure out, look, I got to do
Right.
all these things if I'm going to stay in this
Right.
industry?
I had a lot of, and I want to say this because I think it's important that people hear this. You have to really believe in yourself, even when no one else does. And so I knew that I had a little bit of an edge on people, intellectually speaking, because I went to a little bit more schooling than everyone else did. So there was a scientific method behind what I was doing, and no one at that time had that added, I guess, skill set.
Mhm.
So I felt like I had some, like I can go to any magazine and say, what do you want me to write for you? And I can write the article, So it gave me a little bit I felt like I had like an edge on the industry at that time, at least, because I can be a person who's going to educate people, and people pay for education. I knew that. So
Yeah.
I said, you know what? I got to keep my options for income open, meaning that if one dries up, I have another one. You can't just depend on a contract, because if the company kind of decides they don't want to have you anymore, then you don't have any money coming in. And I saw this happen to a lot of bodybuilders. So that's why when I started my personal DavePalumbo.com website, I started selling stuff, other people's stuff on there that I believed in. And so I had a little income coming in from that. I had some guest postings. I was writing for some articles, some magazines, and some online sites. I had some money coming in from that. So then I got a contract and I had money coming. So I always try to keep, and then I would train people at the gym, and I was just like a hustler. So I would do anything. I was doing commercials. I worked for Mike Lyons. I would go into Manhattan and go for commercial every once in a while. I get commercials, and that helped boost my image too. They would get me on talk shows like Jenny Jones show, whatever shows were of the day, Rolanda. And I would try to keep myself spread out with a lot of diversity, because I said, if I always have different money sources coming in, I'll always be making money, even if something dries up. And so no one taught me that. I might have heard it someplace, but I just knew that if you can keep your income streams diversified, that's probably the best way to do it, rather than throw all your chips into one barrel, so to speak. And I still do that today, so it helps.
But what was it that got you to figure it out? Like, look, the bodybuilding thing is obvious. You're going to get contracts. The coaching thing is obvious because you have the knowledge and you want to help people. What made you go, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast, or not a podcast at the time, but let's say you're doing the website. I'm going to start a website. What made you think I'm going to sell other people's stuff? Like, what was the trigger for you to do these things? Or did you just go, you know what? I need to make money. Like, was the driving force, I need to find as many ways to make money as possible? Or were you like, I want to be this mogul across the bodybuilding?
No, I was petrified that I'd have to get a real job. That's the real honest truth.
That's how I feel.
Petrified that my father was going to say, all right, the party's over, get back to get a job now.
That's right. Actually, that's very, very true. It's like, you know why? I think as bodybuilders, when you have a contract, life is pretty good. Like you heard James Hollingshead is in the chat. Get yourself a coffee, chaps. Hello, James. How are you? No, but when you're bodybuilding, you have a contract, as you know, with metrics. You live a pretty good life. You have a monthly salary. You get to go to the gym whenever you want. You don't have to get up for a 9 to 5. And like you said, when that party's over, you're like, well, fuck, I don't want to go from doing whatever I want to going to a factory for a 9 to 5, or you know what I mean? So,
I'll tell you something that I never told anyone. Every check that I got from metrics, I sent into the government and paid my student loans off with it. I never spent a penny of the metrics money for whatever. I worked for them for 4 years. They paid my student loans off, essentially.
So where were you making your money?
Loans. What?
Where were you making your money?
No, I was still, I was still making money, like off my website and appearances and stuff like that. But I lived at home with my dad, everyone's like, why don't you buy your own house, or why don't you get cars? I'm like, I'm not going anywhere or doing anything until that student loans are paid off, because that was like a guillotine hanging over my neck. Once I paid those off, and it took me about 3 years, I paid everything I made from them went to there. My father couldn't believe it. And I said, all right, now I'm out of here. Now I started saving money and I moved out of my dad's house. But I lived, I ate the tuna and rice, and I did, I never went out to eat, and I just conserved money, because I said, I got to pay these loans off. And I don't think a lot of people would do that, you got to be smart. When you're young, you can suffer a little bit. There's nothing, you don't have to live the life of like, a rap star, when you're 25 years old, suck it up.
It's hard with Instagram nowadays. You got to live the Instagram life.
I know, because everyone wants to show off the stuff they got. That's why,
That's right. So how old were you when you moved out?
I was older than I want to admit. I'm trying to think. Let me think.
You weren't like 30, were you?
No, I was, but it was close. It was like 28 or something like that.
Yeah, but it's smart. So you paid everything off, and then
can you imagine though? I was in school. I was in college 4 years away from home. Then I went 3 years to medical school, and then I moved back with my dad for like 5 years. It was terrible, because I wanted to be off on my own, but I didn't care, because bodybuilding was the most important thing. I didn't give a shit. It didn't matter.
Right. I want to ask you quickly about school before we go to the Olympia.
Yeah.
So you went to did you go to medical school or pharmacy school?
No, I went to medical school. So I went to 4 years of college at
Yeah.
Franklin and Marshall College. It was like a pre-med program, but I took
Okay.
other classes too. And
Yeah.
then I applied to medical school. I got into two places. I wound up going to New York Medical College in Westchester, New York, just north of the city. And I did first 2 years there are like classroom work, in labs and stuff like that, and gross anatomy, all that. Then the third year, you start doing what's called rotations. You go into the hospitals and you're going from hospital to hospital. You're doing medicine, pediatrics, psychiatry. So I did a few of those rotations and I hated it. I hated working in the hospital like with a passion. I felt it was a
Really?
waste of time. All they did was write prescriptions for everyone. It was terrible. I hated it. I said, you know what? Anything that feels this terrible cannot be what I need to do. And I had all the knowledge because I did the first 2 years, which was all this classroom work. So I
Right.
said, I took a year off. I said, I'm going to take a year off because I went to the guidance counselors there. They said, you know what? You've been in school for 7 years, out of high school straight. Why don't you take a year off? I said, great. So then, of course, 100% into bodybuilding, right?
That's the
Never went
problem.
back. Never
Yeah.
went back to that. Yeah. Now, if I
Everybody,
wasn't successful in bodybuilding, I would have gone back, but I started becoming successful. So I realized that was the path I needed to go.
most of the time when people take a year off, they don't end up going back. But
Yeah, because I really didn't want to go back. I just said I was going to go back, but I didn't really, in my mind, think I was going to go back. I knew once I was out of there, there's no way I'm going back to this.
but like I left school, but I wasn't an academic. I was like, I hated fucking school.
Right,
I was in a criminology course. I just wanted to be a police officer. Like, I
right.
can't imagine being like that level of academia and then being like, fuck it, I'm going to be a bodybuilder.
I'll tell you. I'm going to tell you why. Because I had other psychological problems going on, and here it was. So my mother dies when I'm 14 years old of pancreatic cancer. All right, vicious death. My grandfather had died a couple years before that. Everyone on my mother's side of the family was dying of cancer. I'm at this point, I'm young, right? I'm like, I'm not going to die of cancer. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I am not going to live a miserable life and then die of cancer. So I'm like, I'm going to do whatever gives me pleasure. And you know what? If I don't like this school shit and it's not resonating with me and I have something else that I have a passion for, I'm going to go do it. And I said, you know what? Because I'll die otherwise. And I really believed that I was going to get cancer and die if I would have stayed in medical school. That so supremely that it convinced me to leave and give the bodybuilding a chance. Now, let's say I would have torn a pec or I didn't do well in bodybuilding, I would have gone back probably because what else am I going to do? I don't have any, I would have had to, go. I would have been an idiot not to go back. But I said I was so enthralled with the whole bodybuilding and changing how you look and about health because
Yeah.
I really believed that cancer was caused by eating the wrong foods, not working out and living an unhealthy mental and physical lifestyle. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to do the anti-cancer, lifestyle
Okay.
because I am not going to succumb to whatever genetics I was given by, my mother's family. And that really was what pushed me out the door because I don't think I would have had the balls to do. If my mother was alive, I would have been a doctor. I'd be like a neurosurgeon now. But so I just that really is what helped me do that. If I didn't have that if I didn't have that loss in my life where I was, that pain, I probably wouldn't have had the balls to leave.
Okay, but you know what's going to happen? Most people are going to hear that and go, "You were scared of cancer, and then you went and took a bunch of steroids."
Because I didn't care. I said, well, you know what? If I get cancer and die, I'm going to get cancer and die anyway.
So you were like, I'm going to live it up while I'm here, kind of thing.
Right. I'm going to be like, I'm going to
you.
do what gives me pleasure and what I feel inside is my passion is telling me to do.
I get
If
that.
I die, I'm probably dying of cancer anyway. So what's the big deal?
I get it.
I had that like I don't care anymore attitude.
It's reductive thinking, but I think we've all been there at some point.
No, I'm not saying it was healthy thinking.
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
telling you what
yeah.
I was. How I went through it.
Listen, it's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Dave, I appreciate you being so open with me.
Yeah.
Okay, we've been on for about an hour, so I think we should get into the Olympia.
Okay.
Let me just see here. I got to share this screen real quick. Okay, Dave, I have this sheet built out for all the guys. I'm going to add you. I'm going to add you to it.
Okay.
So we're going to put Dave Palumbo right here.
Oh no, I got it.
All right, you're going to give me your top 10, and then we're going to see how you do after the show is done.
I'm the worst. But by the way, I want to tell you, I can analyze this lineup and give you a great analysis of who I think is going to place, and you'll say that makes sense, and I'll be completely wrong. I'm always wrong,
Oh, it
but
doesn't matter. I'm like that too. I'm like that too. Ian, for some reason, Ian is got like a horseshoe in his ass. He fucking wins every week. He gets every fucking prediction right. No, but
really,
yeah, he's
that's
he's
funny.
pretty he's pretty good at it. But yeah, no, I'm wrong all the time too, so I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go here just in case you want to see the list. I'm on your page. Those people who don't follow RX Muscle, there's the RX Muscle Instagram page. It's
Thank you.
official underscore RX Muscle.
Yeah.
And if you go to YouTube, you go
We
RX.
we have a big contest we're going to be launching this year, where you could actually sign up. You pick your top 15. I got to give Sid credit for this because Sid mastermind this whole thing, and you'll be able to actually pick your top 15 picks. It'll go into it, and then there's going to be prize packages and everything like that. And if you get them right, I mean, because last year we did top 10, and like 5 people got top 10. I don't know how they
Right,
picked it. So this year
right.
we're doing top 15.
Yeah.
And that contest will be out soon on RX Muscle. Just keep an eye out for that. But
Okay. Is that going to be
yeah,
out? Is that going to be out on the Instagram page, or how are you gonna?
yeah, we'll probably promote it on Instagram and everything like that, and you'll be able to like
Okay.
sign up and go to a link, and you'll be able to put your predictions in, and we have a whole, like I said, we're going to be putting together a bunch of prize packages and stuff like that giveaway.
This is Dave's YouTube page. If you go to at RX Muscle on YouTube, you can find
Thank you.
millions and millions of videos. Some informative, some just shit talking.
Yeah.
But you know what? Actually, just before we get to Olympia, one more thing.
Yeah.
Um, what is it? How do you think media has changed since you started? Because I feel like, look, some people think like to say I did started podcasts. I didn't. I think I just do podcasts a little differently than they were done before.
Right. Right.
But media now is very, very different than it was in 2005. I mean, obviously there's the obvious parts like there's no magazines, there's no message boards, but
Right.
just your specific media, has it changed? Like, do you do more drama than you did before? Do you do less drama? Do you do more information? Like, or is it still kind of the same mixed bag that you've always done?
Hmm. Well, first of all, I want to give you a compliment because I think what you're doing is great. There's very few people that I can actually compliment and say they're doing like legitimate, reporting, and you really do a very good job over there. And you're
Thank
one
you,
of the
Dave.
people that I respect what you're doing because you're not some like kid in his basement, who
Yeah.
just happened to get lucky and has a big following. You actually know
Thank
what
you.
you're talking about. So,
Thank you.
people are going to pick on you and me no matter what. Not everyone likes you. It's just the way it goes. But
Yeah.
um, I always, the YouTube algorithm, from what we know now, rewards content that is very similar, right? They want you to do the same thing every day. And every day they want you to do it, and they want you to do the same thing. And if you do that, you tend to have a much more popular channel. I can't do that because I'm like a creative person. I have to do creative stuff. I can't
Right.
do the same content. I probably, if I did a rant every single day, I'd probably have 10 times the amount of traffic on the site. So, but I can't do that because that's just not who I am. I have to do
Right.
who I have to have some entertainment. I have to have some education. I have to have some analysis of bodybuilding. I got to keep it varied because otherwise I'll go insane. And people don't
Yeah.
know this, and that's why I give you credit. It's very hard to put out content every single day.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this for 15 years now, so RX Muscle is 15 years old. I did it 3 years before that with MD. Most people don't last because it's very, 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 very difficult to constantly put original stuff out. So if I don't enjoy what I'm doing, then I'm not
Right.
going to do it.
Right.
I'm going to fail. So I know what I know what I can't do the same type of content every single day. So I keep it varied for my own sanity, and I think the viewers enjoy it. And I tell people this all the time. I say, I was telling Chris Cecina this the other day we were talking. I said, there's probably 15,000 legitimate hardcore bodybuilding fans out there. Okay.
Okay.
And this is my belief
Yeah.
worldwide.
Right.
And I think that probably you, me, there's a couple sites that have those guys locked up. Those guys are always going to watch my content. They're always going to watch your content. And then anything beyond that you get, like if you do a video and it gets 50,000 views, that's coming from, or 100,000 views, it's coming from other people that are
Right.
really not hardcore bodybuilding fans, but maybe find what you're doing or saying intriguing.
Right, right,
or
right.
maybe YouTube recommended it to them. And so those people are not necessarily buyers. So as long as I have the 15,000 locked up hardcore guys, I know that that anything that I'm selling or that I'm promoting is reaching the right audience. So I don't do YouTube because I'm worried about the YouTube check that I'm getting. I do YouTube because I want to promote an agenda, which is what my knowledge base is. I want to educate people. I want people to buy my nutritional supplements. Obviously, I own Species Nutrition. You have your own Hostile brand. You want them to buy those. And so you're doing what you need to do to promote that business and your business, and I'm able to promote my businesses, whether it be coaching or the nutrition supplements. And in doing so, people will spend money on your stuff because they are so happy that you're giving away all this free content every single day because it's something for them to listen to.
Sure.
And I think that that's my business model. It's probably yours too. Do we both want to have 100 million views on every video? Of course.
Yeah.
But it's not really that important because as long as the right people are watching our video content, then we're doing the job that we're supposed to be doing.
So I agree with you to a certain degree. I think so when I started the podcast, I hadn't started Hostile yet. The podcast was first, and the podcast wasn't created to promote Hostile. It kind of just happened because I started Hostile after the podcast.
Right.
Now, is there an element that I'm like, yes, the podcast viewers know that I own Hostile, and in turn, some of them end up buying the product? Yes, there's definitely that element to it. But is there part of you, because this is how I feel about my podcast, because every week, a lot of people that listen to Bro Chat or Bodybuilding Bollocks or whatever, or even people that will listen to this, people that watch my channel are not the hardcore bodybuilding fans only. I get a lot of people that like, I don't know too much about bodybuilding. How is the judging done? What does this term mean? Like it's a very, very periphery. Like they don't know very much about it at all. And they're just all of a sudden have become interested for some reason.
Well,
so,
they're trying to learn. You're educating them about bodybuilding. Yeah.
Right. So I get a lot of those people. So I guess my question to you is this, even though you have those 15,000 locked up, because I feel this, do you feel like there's part of you that wants to show bodybuilding in a more positive light or mainstream light to capture the people that aren't those 15,000? Like, do you think of ways, like when you're sitting there and you're thinking in your business mind, do you think of ways where you can go, you know what, that person doesn't like bodybuilding, but I want to be able to bring them in? Do you try and think of those things, or have you been doing it for so long now that you're like, these are the people I'm going to focus on because they're the ones that really love bodybuilding?
I don't even think about who's watching the show. I do content that I know people. Most of the stuff that I enjoy doing is the educational stuff. I like to educate people. That's why my Ask Dave TV show, which is every Wednesday.
Very good.
I think that's my favorite show that I do because I get to answer the people's questions who are submitting it. And I think that a lot of people come up to me and say, that's how I learn in bodybuilding. I watch Ask Dave. I go back and watch all the old shows. I watch what you're doing because the more, even if you repeat stuff, they said it like reinforces the concepts in my mind. And so in that sense, I'm always trying to educate people. But I think that people, it's like going to school. You don't want to take classes all day long. You have to have gym and art. And
of course,
you need some other fun stuff in there as well. So
right.
I wanted to build a playground like Cheers, like the bar Cheers, where everyone knows your name and it's like a cool place to hang out and all the characters and so every show has its own little energy about it. And I think it's just like it's like a cool clubhouse. That's how I originally envisioned RX Muscle, the website, when I launched it. It's a place to hang out. The message boards, people would kind of break each other's balls on there. Now it's this, no one does message boards anymore. They do chat boxes on the YouTube videos, but people love to show up every Tuesday when we do after hours and all the lunatics I have on there, and they want to comment and they'll give us tips, and I'll tell them I'm keeping all the tips. I'm not giving anyone their money. And they like to argue and go crazy. It's like a shtick, but it's like people look forward to it. And so if I can pull new people in, I'm hoping I'm always pulling new people in because I think there's always people, like you said, who are trying to find out, hey, how do I eat right? How do I get into bodybuilding? What is competition about? What do I have to do? Who should I contact for suits and tanning and so we're information providers, we probably have a lot of the same people cross over. We probably have different people, and that's great because there's room for everyone to have a podcast because people will watch who they resonate with, who they're more comfortable with.
Agree. Okay, let's get into
Olympia.
the serious stuff. All right. Who do you think is going to win the Olympia, Dave?
You know, I really, really, really like Andrew Jack, but I don't think he's ready to win yet. I think he's close there. I think he's very close. I think that Derek made some insane improvements, at least from what I'm seeing
Okay,
on his
wait.
Instagram.
Wait, I want to pick at these
Yeah.
one at a time.
Okay.
Why Andrew? Why do you think he's could win and why do you think he's not going to win?
Okay. Okay. I think he's got height, okay, which is very important in bodybuilding. Some of the best Mr. Olympias always had height, and he's even taller than, than the Dorians and the Ronnies and stuff like that. He's got height, but he's got really good shape and structure. He's got a tiny waist. He's got crazy, body parts. This guy is like untapped potential. I mean, when have you seen a big guy have a great ab thigh shot? Like it's like almost
I know.
unbeatable, his
Yeah.
ab thigh shot.
Yeah.
And front double bicep is ridiculous as well. And I think the reason he might not win this year is because I think his legs still can be a little bigger. And
You think that's the reason?
I think his legs are just not there yet. I think they're close.
Right,
Because I
right,
think,
right.
because when he won Texas, he could have been a little harder. And so Chris is going to have to bring him a little tighter for the Olympia, which might bring his legs down a little bit. I don't know. Chris says he's grown too since Texas, but I think he might need one more year. That's just what I'm
So
thinking.
my
I think, yeah,
so just to give you my assessment
yeah,
of Andrew is very simple. From the front, especially the front double front lat,
yeah,
he's first across the board. Nobody beats him in those
right.
shots.
No,
But then the side and the back, he's like fifth, right? Like who that's kind of how I assess the show. So like side chest, where does he land in a side
well, but
chest?
he's fifth behind who? Who does he is he behind?
Well, just think about who's got a better side chest. Derek, Hottie, Samson, Nick, you know.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't know about Samson. I don't know if Samson's hard enough to beat Andrew this year, but we'll see. We'll see.
I mean, you got to bet for sure.
I don't
Because
bet.
I was
I
gonna say,
don't,
if aside from the poses, I
yeah,
think Andrew's biggest fault
yeah,
because he's an amazing from the front,
yeah.
he's first place. From the back and side, he's not. And I think that's the problem. It's like
Well,
when you look at him from the front, you're like,
right,
that's Mr. Olympia, right?
right. Yes,
From the side and the back, and you know what? This is something Samson struggled with too. When people
yes,
see Samson from the front and the side, they're like, that's Mr. Olympia. When he turns around to the
right,
back, his
right,
back still needs a lip. So and I think that's why Derek and Hottie do so well. They have the full turn,
right.
right? Anyway,
They're complete, and that's why I was going to say I have Derek winning again because
okay.
I think he's made improvements. I don't think Hottie will be better than he was at the Arnold, and I think Derek is going to be a lot better than he was at the Olympia. So I have Derek beating him again. I think with a Hottie close second, and I would probably I'm going to put Andrew third. I really think he's going to be third.
Derek.
I think those are the only two guys he can't beat. I think he beats Nick because Nick just doesn't have the shape and structure, and I
Okay.
think that's why Nick won't beat Samson. I'm assuming Samson's coming in tighter than he was last year, so I have Samson fourth with Nick fifth, and that's I think
Nick.
that's but Nick is one of these guys that like if someone's off, if Samson's off or Andrew's off, Nick could certainly move up to that third place, I think easily. As far as the rest of the lineup goes, let me just see who's.
So let me just give you a few. What about Brandon Curry, Martin, Hunter? Those
Yeah,
three. I'm interested in those three.
yeah.
You don't think Brandon Curry can crack this top five?
I think that Brandon's legs are a weakness for him. It's always been, and I think that these guys that we just mentioned have insane legs, and I think that he can't beat those guys unless that someone comes in off. Brandon's very dangerous because his structure is so beautiful and he flows so well that if someone's off conditioning wise and Brandon happens to come in very lean, he can certainly move up. I don't think he's beaten the top two guys, but I think he can be as high as third, but I think he can also be as low as like seventh, in this lineup too, depending on, how these other guys come in. Martin is I thought Martin beat Nick at the New York Pro. I mean, that's how
I
good
know.
he was.
Yeah, he was
I
very
think
good.
that I don't think Nick was at his best though. And even
No.
though Nick would say he's at his best, if Nick would have been at his best, I don't think it would have been close. But
Right.
I love Martin's physique. I think next year we're going to see Martin. move into that top 5 at the Olympia. I don't think he's going to do it this year though.
So
I think
okay, so
he's
if
gonna be
I'm
sixth or
picking,
seventh.
so if I'm picking a sixth spot,
Yeah,
I would, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I
yeah.
think it's Hunter, Martin, or Curry are in there. But if you think somebody else, let me know who you think.
No, I agree, and you know, Hunter is, I would say at his best he would be in there, but you know, if I was a betting man, Martin has been fucking nailing it conditioning wise. I'd go Martin in there ahead of
Okay,
Hunter, with Hunter right behind him and Brandon right behind Hunter.
Hunter, Curry,
Just
and we have two.
Hunter historically hasn't been great at the Olympia, you know.
Yeah, and we have two spots left, and there's people like Raphael, Akeem, John Jewett, John De La Rosa, Theo.
I,
Um,
I have Akeem in that next spot, and then I have Della Rosa right behind him.
Akeem and De La Rosa. You think they're going to beat Raphael, eh?
Yes, yes.
What about guys like Bruno who just won that show last weekend?
Right. I love him. I think he's a freak of freaks, but I think in this long, when you start putting him next to guys with the crazy structures, he's not going to be able to stand next to
Gonna
these
get
guys.
lost. All right, let's
Yeah.
take a look at your list compared to my list. See where we're
All right.
where
Let me
we
see. Yeah.
where we
I'm going to put
differ.
my glasses up to this one.
This is
Where's
where
your list?
I'm right here.
All right. You got to go Samson first. Yeah. Because he's your guy.
Listen, listen, Dave. Samson is fucking harder than he was last year already, and
If,
he's
look,
still
if he
got 3 weeks
comes
to
in,
go.
right. I'll give you this. If Samson comes in with conditioning like, you know, we know he needs to have, he's unbeatable, you know, almost.
That's why I put him there because I think
I just haven't
listen,
seen him do that yet. So
listen, everybody says the same thing, and they've been saying it for at least 2 years.
I know.
If Samson gets shredded, he will win the Olympia. So
Yeah.
I'm just telling you my reasoning. It's not just because he's a hostile athlete. Because
Right.
last year I didn't have him in first.
Okay.
This year, because his condition is already where it's supposed to be,
Right.
it's already better than it was on stage 3 weeks out. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, let's. I'm this year putting my chips in.
You,
So
you know
anyway,
what the funny thing is? He said, I actually like him. I would love to see him win because I think he's such a good person. You know,
he is a good.
every
Everybody
time I've
loves Samson.
interviewed him and talked to him, he's just a genuinely great guy, and he loves bodybuilding, and he's been through so much crazy shit with traveling and to shows, and you know,
I know.
you know, I'd love to see him pull it off. You know, it was, but it almost feels like, remember when Big Ramy, we were all waiting for him to show up in shape,
Yeah,
and you know, he never really pulled it off. You know, he kind of was.
I think
close.
he did. 20. What was it? 21.
Yeah, but
first time
he was
won.
better than he was, but he wasn't still like granity hard. You know?
I think some guys just don't get like that though. You know what? That's actually a good point. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I said this to a friend. We were talking. I think it was me and Paul were talking.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know, if you took like the top 3 things that judges score on, which is symmetry, condition, and muscularity.
Yeah.
And you have to mark them out of 10. And you say Derek is a 10 out of 10 conditioning from the back, usually anyway.
Yeah.
And then Samson is, let's say, an 8 out of 10.
Okay.
Samson doesn't have to match Derek's conditioning to beat him. He's basically got to go from an 8 to a 9.
9. Yes, I agree.
If he can go from an 8 to a 9, he's got a 10 in shape and a 10 in muscularity.
Yeah, I agree.
And then
let me ask you this question. Do you believe, and this is, you know, I'm starting to believe this more, that the way you train happens to reflect, you know, the level of granity looking muscle fibers you have on stage? Because, you know, we always saw Dorian and Ronnie, who trained super heavy, intense. They got that like gnarly, metallic-y looking muscle on stage when they would lean out. And then you had guys that, like Vince Taylor, who would do like 20-pound dumbbell curls, whose arms are huge, but they didn't ever look like granity, you know.
I've thought this many times, because you look at people like Dexter, Sean Roden, Phil Heath.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these guys have beautiful muscle and a ton of it, but it's not gritty like a Branch Warren.
Yeah.
You know, but then I'm like, is it genetic? Is it just white guys? You know, I mean, Ronnie's an anomaly, but like, you know, but seriously, if you think about it,
Jay
like,
got granity looking though, you know.
No, he didn't. Jay didn't.
You don't think
No, Jay didn't get the same level of condition as Branch.
No, not.
That's what I mean, though. So like Jay,
yeah.
but then that kind of goes to your point, because Jay never trained really, really heavy.
That's true, right? True.
So I don't know. I've thought that we've asked that question to each other on the podcast many times because
Yeah.
it does seem that the guys who go crazy with the poundages have a different
Right.
look to their muscle.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I mean,
Sorry.
because I was wondering maybe that's why Ramy never really had. I mean, Ramy was strong, but I never saw him really doing like, like crazy intense set. You never watched his training and said, "Wow, this guy trains like an animal," you know?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a difference between strong and then strong for that person.
Right. That's
You know
true.
what I mean? Like
Yeah.
If Ramy's shoulder pressing 3 plates, can he really do 4? Like we
That's
don't.
right. No, you're
Yeah.
right. You're right. Wasn't
Yeah.
pushing his body. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll go back to my list here. We got Samson,
All right.
Derek, Hottie, Nick, Brandon, Andrew, Martin, Hunter, Raphael, and Bonac. We have totally different lists.
So you have Andrew out of the top 5.
I know that.
You think
Okay.
Curry's going to beat
Okay. Wait.
Andrew?
Okay. Wait. Okay. Wait. Okay. First of all, that might be a little bit biased because I really like Brandon, and he's like
Okay.
he's a good friend.
You
Now,
can't vote
but
on
hold on,
friendship.
but hold on. I'm not just doing it based on friendship because the thing is, last year Brandon was 4th,
Right.
and I thought Brandon looked phenomenal. He was big as a house.
Yeah.
The reason he was 4th is not because of his downsized legs. The reason he was 4th is because he spilled over.
Right.
If
Right.
Brandon's the same size as last year,
Well, you remember, Brandon was in the hospital the day before, if you remember. Remember last year?
right. So what I'm saying is, if Brandon is the same size but harder,
Yeah.
why would he not be in the top 5?
Because I think the guys were all a little off last year. If you remember, it was a really late prejudging, and guys were just like holding water. It was
Yeah,
just like,
Hottie was a little
yeah,
off.
Hottie wasn't at his best.
Nick
Samson
wasn't
wasn't at his
there.
best. Yeah.
Nick wasn't there. Andrew
Nick
was
wasn't there.
yeah.
I think it was a special case, but that could
Yeah,
happen
but
again.
wait a minute. That doesn't really mean anything because they were all off and he was still 4th.
Well, Derek really wasn't off, and
But that's why he won. But I'm saying the rest of the guys were all off and he was still 4th. So if they're all
yeah,
off again,
Andrew was off. Yeah. Well, if guys are off, I think Curry can move up. But I'm saying we're trying to handicap this, all things given that everyone's at their best, which we know is not going to happen. But if everyone was at their best, you have to. That's how you have to handicap it.
This is my argument. Andrew seems to get Andrew seems to get worse as the season goes on, not better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like last year, I think we saw him do Texas where he looked incredible.
Yeah.
And at the Olympia, he missed it.
I'm going to give you some insider trading though. After Texas last year, he went to Nigeria and he wasn't really focused. This year, he's 100%.
He's all in. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the second thing I'm thinking is a lot of people are putting Brandon out of the top 5 based on his legs and based on he hasn't posted any pictures and he's getting older.
Right.
This has got to be the year where he slides.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm just kind of holding out hope we still have like Brandon from last year.
I think he'll probably look comparable to last year. I just think the guys are going to have gotten better, and I think that's the only reason. I don't think he's going to be out of shape, or I don't think he's going to look bad. I just think these other guys are going to improve. That's my.
All right. So this one I can probably agree with you. Like these picks aren't locked in. I still have a few weeks to change them.
I don't want to influence you or anything like that.
No. Listen. This was these change week to week, but this.
So who did you kick out of the top 10 that I don't have in the top 10? Because you put Bonac in there. So
you put De La Rosa in 10th and Hakeem.
Okay.
I have Raphael and Bonac.
Oh, I'll tell you, I've seen pictures of Hakeem. He looks insane. I can't imagine Hakeem not making the top 10. He might even be higher, than I'm saying.
Really?
But yeah, he looks really good. Really good.
Send me some pictures so I can change my picks and beat Ian.
I will. I will. Go on.
You know what?
Pull his Instagram up. You'll see some pictures. You'll be impressed.
All right, let's take a look. One sec.
He's a genetic freak, Akeem. So you can never count him out. And Chris is working with him, so I know he's going to be his best.
You know what? I love Akeem's physique. The back is always his weak point.
He's got high lats. He's got very high lats, but
like this is so impressive.
Yeah.
But then is he going to lose the back shots to someone like William?
If he comes in crazy. I mean,
yeah. It's really just the back double. I mean, the back lat spread, he does a good job of pulling out.
Look at that waist.
Yeah, I know. No, he's gotten crazy structure. Like he's
go to the next picture. Yeah, go to the next picture.
Yeah, that's way better. He should.
Yeah.
It's weird. I don't like it necessarily crunched because it lowers his shoulders.
Yeah, I don't either. Yeah, but it looks impressive though.
Both, I guess, both look good. His waist still looks good here.
Yeah,
Um,
and
yeah,
that
no,
was at
look,
6 weeks out. So
yeah. These are
his legs improved. He's got a lot more muscle maturity than he did, when I worked with him back in, the day. He's dangerous. You just don't know.
it's just the
He's a wild
back.
card. He's not consistent.
Okay. Do you want to do a couple questions before you go?
Sure.
All right, everybody in the chat. I'm going to take a couple questions for Dave before we go because we've been on for like an hour and a half. So if you have any questions, this guy says Fouad should argue more. I barely fucking argued with. I barely fucking argued with you. What the fuck?
We really don't have any arguments. I don't know.
No.
The only arguments Fouad and I ever have is over someone I have on the show who says something. It's never about what I say.
Yeah. I love how passionate you guys have always been about the show, about bodybuilding. This gets me hyped for the Olympia. Fouad really hates Andrew. I don't know why people say every time, because I don't put him like in the top 3. People think I don't fucking hate Andrew. I don't know why people keep saying this. Listen, there's none of this. Dave, I know you've probably encountered this a lot. It's hard to predict shows and talk about shows and not offend someone.
Oh, I offend everyone gets offended all the time.
I know of at least 2 bodybuilders who won't talk to me simply because of places where I've put them in predictions.
It happens to me all the time. I don't even care anymore. It doesn't even matter.
Well,
I got to do my job.
I know, but it bothers me because I'm like, we're trying to promote the sport. We're trying to promote bodybuilding. It's not personal. Like I was a pro. I know how hard it is to be judged. I have respect for all these guys. Like they're all better than I was anyways.
Right.
I'm like, but we have to assess the show.
Listen, I criticized last year the fact that the prejudging went on at 10:30 at night.
Right.
And I was saying that the bodybuilders didn't look their best because they had to wait around all night to go on. I was saying, why can't you put the men on first? It's the prejudging. The women are finals. They're done already. You know what I mean? And, some of the people who were running the Olympia were upset that I said that. They thought I was doing it for clickbait. I said, no, I really believe that. I said, you might be mad at me because I said that, but it was my truth. And I say it's a lot of other people's truths too. They may not be willing to say it, but that's the truth. The bodybuilders should come first at the show. It's not the show. The show doesn't come first. The bodybuilders should come first for prejudging. Right. Finals, different story. But for prejudging, these guys should not be hanging around all day long waiting to get on stage and all night.
Well, I think you're 100% right. This is the problem though, as a promoter, because I've been promoting shows for 15 years now. If the bodybuilders go on first on Friday night at like 6 o'clock, everyone's going to leave afterwards.
No, they're not. You know why?
I'm telling you, they'll stay for classic maybe, but they're not staying for all the. I mean,
but who cares? You got their money already.
Well, I mean, you want for marketing purposes. You want your audience to be full as long as possible.
Listen, you and I might leave, which I wouldn't, but you and I might leave because we have to go do a wrap up. But you know what the truth is? If I spend $150 on a ticket, for the Olympia VIP ticket, I'm not leaving until that show's over. So, I might have most of my interest in the men, but I'm certainly not going to leave the auditorium and take off after I paid $150, $250 for a ticket. So
I'm not saying everybody will, but let's say half the audience leaves. Half.
I don't think half will leave. I really don't believe that.
Okay. But I think that.
I could be wrong. Like, look, I'm just voicing my opinion. That's all. I'm for the athletes first.
If you're right, Dave, and no, but this is a solution I was going to give.
Oh, what's your solution?
So at the Detroit show, we have a set time for, and I know this is complicated. You probably can't do it at the Olympia. So nobody take this as what they should be doing. We have a set time for the pros. Now for us, it's very easy because we have one class. This year we're going to have classic, but we have a set time for the pros. So prejudging's at 11 o'clock. So we'll run the NPC show at 9. No matter what class we're on at the NPC show, it stops at 11.
That's great.
And the bodybuilders go on, right?
So that's phenomenal. I love it.
I think, and I don't know if that's possible during Olympia, but if they told the guys at the Olympia, look, you're going on at 8 o'clock.
Yes.
No matter how the show goes, 8 o'clock, you're going on. I don't know if
I think that's a phenomenal compromise.
I
Great.
don't know. I don't know if it's logistically possible, but
Why not?
yeah,
You can do anything, you know?
yeah, yeah. Anyway, let me get to some of these
All
questions.
right. Yeah.
Fouad, ask Dave what natural bodybuilders should focus on the most.
Eating and training. That's the only thing you have left. No, I think that, and I think you'd agree with this. Eating is 85% of your body.
Yeah, I do.
85%. That's a lot. Is
Yeah,
what you eat on a daily basis. Ask Nick Walker when the last time he missed a meal was. He'll tell you 10 years ago, because
right.
that's why his progress is so good. You cannot miss meals, especially as a natural athlete, because it's not forgiving. You miss one meal a week, you might as well erase the whole week of progress.
You know, the other thing I find strange when people ask like natural this versus enhanced this, there aren't that many differences. Like I had Bob Waterhouse on the
Yeah.
podcast. He turned pro in classic as a natural,
Mhm.
and now
Okay.
he's not natural anymore. But
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
turned. But I asked him this very question because I get these all the time from natural athletes. Oh, what should I do for this? I'm like, you do the same shit. You
Drugs
might,
just make things work better. That's all. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you might not be training as long or whatever because you
Right.
don't have the drugs to help, but it's not really that different. So, according to Bob, anyway, he's a natural athlete. So,
Yeah.
um, what's your take on seal rows for the back and Zercher squats for legs? Do you know what a seal row is? Where you lay flat on your stomach?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was having this conversation with someone at the gym. This guy, Paulie Brooklyn. Okay, so you can imagine what Paulie Brooklyn does.
Yeah.
Paul, and I'm in Florida, so Paulie Brooklyn is in Florida with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were talking about why people are trying to reinvent the wheel when it comes to training. If you want a big back, do bent over barbell rows. If you want, big leg, squat. If you want a big, upper chest, and incline, barbell, press and incline dumbbell press. There's, there's a million exercises, but is there one exercise that's the secret exercise that's going to give you what you're missing? Probably not. You probably just don't train right. Or
Right.
your form is not good. You're not using full range of motion. You're too worried about how much weight you're lifting. And it goes on and on and on. I see so many people that come to me, and now what I do with my clients, I don't know if you do this at all, is I have them send me video of them
I
training.
did do that at the end, but before I stopped
Yeah,
coaching. Yeah.
right. And you
Right.
know what? I fixed so many
I know.
problems
I know.
because I couldn't believe how horrendous some people's training was. They were doing like quarter squats. They
I
were
know.
doing like the stuff I saw them doing was unbelievable. And I'm like, no wonder why they're not making any
Right.
progress. They're eating right. They're taking the drugs. They're
Yeah.
doing everything except training right. So
Right.
fix your, worry about the core basic movements. And if you want to build muscle, okay, these little eccentric or idiosyncratic little twists and turns that you're going to do are not going to make a big difference in the long run. I promise you.
Yeah.
Do your basic free weight movements, and you'll be very happy with your results.
You know, it's funny you said that. At the end, before I stopped coaching, I used to tell guys to upload their videos to YouTube or to to Instagram.
Yes.
Upload it to Instagram so I can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it wasn't just me telling him it was wrong. There'd be a whole bunch of people
Oh yeah,
commenting.
I don't want to embarrass people. I
Oh
tell them to
no,
send it.
I
Text
I
it to
want to
me.
embarrass because I'm like, listen, you need to know. You need to know your shit's fucked up. Um,
You wanted to give them some therapy too. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Fouad has no credibility when it comes to judging anyways. All right. Well, it's like 30 years 25 years in bodybuilding would say otherwise, but
You have
okay.
no credibility,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ian Valier is in the podcast in the chat.
Hey Ian, what's up?
Okay. All right. These guys are just talking back and forth now. I think
Oh,
Dave, listen, I appreciate you coming on, man. We've been on for quite a
absolutely.
while. Is there anything you want to promote or talk about before we go?
No, just if you guys want to check out the RX Muscle Olympia Predictions contest, we will be putting up some information within the next week about that. How you can sign up for that, and obviously, if anyone wants to come on. By the way, I want to just thank you personally on the air for promoting my Fiberlize,
Oh
fiber
yeah,
product and
dude. The guys,
talking about it.
Dave, everybody I've had on the fucking show. It's so funny. It's like it must be like a bodybuilding thing. Like I've been doing this podcast for 4 years now, or maybe 5. I don't know.
Right.
And I don't remember any bodybuilder coming on this show and mentioning a different fiber product. It's the oh, I take the best dumps. It's like how come nobody has copied this fucking thing yet?
Taking a crap is very important. I'm
I'm
telling you,
gonna
you
come
know.
out. I'm gonna come out with hostile lies.
No, 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 no. Then there'll be hostility between us. No, just
That's
kidding.
right. No,
But no,
no.
I appreciate you promoting the product and talking about it, you know, and you know, it definitely helps sales, and you know, it really helps spread the word, because bodybuilders really need to use a very high quality fiber supplement. Elimination of toxins and waste from your body is as important as putting the right food into your body. So I do appreciate that. And if you guys ever, you know, speciesnutrition.com, you can use coupon code. What's your coupon code I made for you?
I don't remember. I don't remember.
Yeah, I forget the one I made for you. I want to give him yours. I don't want to give him
No,
mine.
just give me yours. It's okay.
No, no, no. I'm going to give him yours so I can see what came from the show.
Did James Hollingshead's in the chat, and he said Luke's favorite was fiber lies.
I know Luke used to rave to me. I really miss him so much, man. He used to rave to me about how much he loved fiber lies. I said, Luke, I appreciate it. You know, he goes, I'm not just saying it because it's you. You know,
Dave, this guy
so
right?
It's poop.
Wait,
POOP. Poop 25.
You made my code poop 25.
Poop 25. You put that in at the speciesnutrition.com, you get 25% off the entire site. So
this guy right? I have to read this. This is fucking hilarious. If Fouad was a judge, Samson would win classic physique and 212.
And through 12, he's giving him till 12 too.
One guy wrote me,
he might be 312. He might be the other way.
One guy wrote me in the comment section, and he said Fouad hates Andrew so much he would put him last. And I'm just tempted to put it in my thing, but people are so crazy. Anyway, and listen, everybody who's watching, we love you. Thank you for participating. Dave,
thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time, man. I appreciate it. We gotta do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great.
Okay, Dave. Thank you.